Welcome back to Learn English Naturally. We're diving into something pretty important today, something you might need anytime you travel internationally.
Oh, definitely. Being able to navigate a hospital visit in English, it can be, well, it can feel pretty overwhelming if you're not prepared.
For sure, and we want you to feel confident, so you can communicate effectively and get the care you need if you ever find yourself needing medical attention in an English-speaking country.
That's the goal.
So how are we going to tackle this today?
Well, we've got some great material that breaks it down step by step. First, we'll lay a good foundation with some key vocabulary.
Love it. A solid vocab base. Got to have that.
Then we'll move on to essential phrases, the kind of things you might need to say in different situations.
Practical stuff. Perfect.
And finally, we'll put it all together with some realistic dialogues.
Dialogues are the best. You really get to see how it all works in a real conversation.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start building that vocabulary, shall we? Some of these words you might already know, but it's always good to review and really nail that pronunciation.
Pronunciation is key. Especially in a medical context, you want to be sure you're understood clearly.
No room for misunderstandings there, that's for sure. So let's take the word prescription. Let's say it together. Prescription.
Prescription. Notice how the stress is on the second syllable.
And make sure you get that P sound at the beginning. Prescription, not rescription.
That's a good point.
All right, how about emergency room? Give that one a try.
Emergency room. Again, pay attention to the stress. It's on the first syllable of emergency and the second syllable of room.
Perfect. Now, let's say you're at the hospital and you're not feeling well. What's a simple way to say you need to see a doctor?
Well, you could just say, I need to see a doctor. Straightforward and to the point.
You could even add a little more information, like, I need to see a doctor. I'm not feeling well.
Exactly. And if you want to be even more specific, you can mention your symptom, like, I need to see a doctor. I have a terrible headache.
What if you have more than one symptom, like a headache and a stomachache? How would you say that?
You could say, I have a headache, and also my stomach hurts.
And also, good to know. Okay, so we've got prescription, emergency room, and some basic phrases for expressing that you need medical attention. Now let's dive into some more specific vocabulary that might come up during a hospital visit.
Sounds good.
First up, symptom. What exactly is a symptom?
A symptom is basically a sign that something's not quite right with your body. It could be something you feel, like pain or dizziness, or something you observe, like a rash or a fever.
So when the doctor asks, what are your symptoms, they're asking what's bothering you, right? What's making you feel unwell?
Precisely. And being able to describe your symptoms accurately is really important for helping the doctor figure out what's going on.
Makes sense. Okay, now this one's super important. Allergy. We all know what allergies are, but why is it so crucial to tell the doctor about them?
Because allergies can have a serious impact on your treatment. The doctor needs to know if you're allergic to any medications, foods, or anything else that could potentially cause a reaction.
Right, like if you're allergic to penicillin or something.
Exactly. So you could say, I'm allergic to penicillin, or I have an allergy to peanuts.
Good examples. Now, another word you might hear at the hospital is examination.
Yes, the examination.
What exactly does that mean in this context?
An examination is when the doctor physically checks your body to get a better understanding of your condition. They might listen to your heart and lungs, look in your ears and throat, feel your abdomen, things like that.
So they're examining you, looking for clues to help them diagnose what's wrong.
Exactly. And you might hear them say something like, I need to examine your throat, or let me examine your abdomen.
Okay, so we've covered symptoms, allergies, and examinations. Let's move on to some useful phrases you can use to interact with the hospital staff. Let's say you arrive at the hospital and it's an emergency. How would you communicate that to the receptionist?
You'd want to use a phrase that conveys urgency, like, it's an emergency, or I need to see a doctor right away.
Right away. That definitely gets the message across.
It does.
Now, what if you need to explain that you're in pain? How would you describe where the pain is and how bad it is?
You could start with, I have pain in my back, and then specify the body part. For example, I have pain in my chest, or I have pain in my lower back.
And to describe how bad it is, you can use words like mild, moderate, or severe.
Exactly. So you could say, I have mild pain in my shoulder, or I have severe pain in my abdomen.
And you can also use more descriptive words, right? Like sharp, dull, aching, or throbbing.
Yes. Those words can help paint a clearer picture of the type of pain you're experiencing.
All right, so we've got some great vocabulary and phrases under our belts. Now, Are you ready to see how this all plays out in real conversations?
Absolutely. Let's dive into those dialogues. I think they'll really bring everything to life.
Me too. So the first dialogue we're going to look at is checking in at the hospital. What are some key things we should be listening for in this conversation?
Well, right off the bat, you'll hear the receptionist use a very common greeting. How can I help you?
Yeah, that's pretty standard, isn't it? It's a polite way to start any interaction in a service setting.
It is. And then notice how the patient responds. They state their need clearly and directly.
And then the receptionist asks that all-important question. What are your symptoms?
Exactly. This is where the vocabulary we just practiced comes into play. The patient needs to be able to describe how they're feeling using specific language.
Right, because I don't feel good isn't going to give the doctor much to go on.
Not really. So listen carefully to how the patient explains their symptoms.
And as we go through this dialogue, pay attention to the flow of the conversation. It's a good example of how a typical interaction at a hospital might go.
And also notice the polite expressions that are used, like please and thank you. Those are always important in any conversation, but especially in a medical setting.
Good point. Politeness goes a long way. Okay, so that's checking in at the hospital. Next up, we have talking to the doctor.
Ah, yes. This is where things get a little more detailed.
So what should we be focusing on in this dialogue?
Well, one thing to notice is how the doctor asks open-ended questions to encourage the patient to provide more information.
Like instead of saying, do you have a fever?
Mm-hmm.
They might say, can you tell me more about how you've been feeling?
Exactly. That gives the patient a chance to really explain what's going on.
And listen for any medical terminology the doctor might use. It's always okay to ask for clarification if you don't understand something.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's your health, after all.
Right. And you might hear the doctor explaining things in simpler terms, too, using analogies or everyday language.
That's a good observation.
Okay, so that's talking to the doctor. Ready for our final dialogue.
Bring it on.
This one takes place at the pharmacy. It's called picking up a prescription.
Now, this is where paying close attention to details is super important.
Why is that?
Because the pharmacist will be giving you specific instructions about your medication, how much to take, how often, and any potential side effects.
You don't want to miss anything there.
Definitely not. So listen carefully to the language the pharmacist uses and the way they phrase the instructions.
And don't hesitate to ask questions if anything is unclear.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From basic vocabulary to more complex dialogues, it's amazing how much we've learned just by breaking it down step by step.
I know, right? It's all about taking it one piece at a time.
Now, before we wrap up this section, I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier, cultural nuances.
Ah, yes. Cultural differences can definitely play a role in how we communicate, especially in a medical setting.
Like, for instance, in some cultures, it might be considered rude to disagree with a doctor, even if you have concerns about your treatment.
That's a great example, so it's important to be mindful of those differences.
Being culturally sensitive and respectful is so important, no matter where you are.
Absolutely. It can really make a big difference in your overall experience.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of great information in this first part. We've got vocabulary, phrases, dialogues, and even some cultural insights.
That's a great foundation for navigating a hospital visit in English. But the learning doesn't stop there.
You're right. It's all about practice, practice, practice.
Exactly. And in the next part, we're going to explore some fun and creative ways to take all of this knowledge and actually make it stick.
Sounds good to me. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be sharing our tips and tricks for mastering medical English. All right, so we've explored essential vocabulary, useful phrases, and even walked through some realistic dialogues. But the learning doesn't stop there. How can we take all of this information and actually make it stick?
Practice. You got to practice, practice, practice. And the great thing is you don't have to wait till you're actually at the hospital.
Oh, I like that. So how can we incorporate this practice into our daily lives?
One fun way is to role play, with a friend or a language partner.
Oh, like acting out different hospital scenarios.
Exactly. You can take turns being the patient, the doctor, the receptionist, even the pharmacist.
That sounds like fun. And it gets you thinking about different situations you might encounter. What are some other creative ways to practice?
You could record yourself, like speaking the dialogue.
Oh, and then listen back.
Yeah. That can help you catch any pronunciation errors or areas where you might need to improve your fluency.
That's a good idea. I also find it helpful to, just try to use these phrases in everyday conversations.
Yeah.
Like instead of saying, my stomach hurts, I might say, I have pain in my abdomen.
That's a great way to make it a habit. And you can also make flashcards.
Flashcards classic, with the key words and phrases.
Yep. That can help with memorization and quick recall.
Those are all great tips.
Hmm.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about asking for clarification. Because sometimes, even if you know the words, it can be hard to understand everything in a medical setting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to be able to say, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that, or could you please repeat that?
Could you please repeat that? Good one. And paraphrasing can be helpful too. Like, so if I understand correctly, you're saying, and then repeat back what you heard in your own words.
That's a great strategy. It shows the doctor that you're actively listening and trying to understand.
Now let's talk about expressing pain. This can be tricky because pain is subjective. How do you explain how you're feeling in a way that the doctor will understand?
Be specific. Use descriptive words that paint a clear picture of your pain. Is it sharp, dull, aching, burning, stabbing, throbbing? Where exactly is the pain?
And does it come and go? Is it constant? Does anything make it worse or better?
All of those details can help the doctor figure out what's causing the pain and how to treat it.
Now, let's talk about receiving instructions. It's so important to understand what the doctor is telling you to do, right? Whether it's about taking medication or scheduling follow-up appointments.
Absolutely. You need to be clear on what you're supposed to do.
So what are some phrases we can use to make sure we've understood the instructions correctly?
You can ask the doctor to go over again, or you can say, just to be sure, I should, and then summarize the instructions in your own words.
That's a good idea. And always ask about potential side effects of any medication you're prescribed.
Oh, yes. You can say, what are some possible side effects of this medication? Or, are there any activities I should avoid while taking this medication?
Those are important questions to ask. It's always better to be informed. Okay, now, remember we talked about cultural sensitivity earlier? Well, this is especially important in medical settings because different cultures have different ways of communicating about health and illness.
Yeah, like in some cultures, it might not be appropriate to make direct eye contact with a doctor or to ask a lot of questions.
So it's good to be aware of those differences. And if you're ever unsure, it's always best to err on the side of caution and be respectful.
Definitely.
Okay, now let's talk about something that can really help you bridge cultural gaps. Exploring resources about healthcare in different countries.
There's so much information available online and in libraries. You can learn about different healthcare systems, cultural norms, and even common medical phrases in other languages.
I've also found it helpful to read personal accounts from people who have experienced healthcare in other countries.
Yeah, those firsthand perspectives can be really valuable.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of practice and exploring different resources, but how can we make the practice itself more engaging and relevant?
Well, one way is to personalize the dialogues. Make them your own. Change the symptoms, the medications, the locations.
That's a great idea. It makes it more fun and memorable.
And you can also try acting out the dialogues with different emotions or accents. Let loose. Have some fun with it.
That's a good point. Learning shouldn't feel like a chore. It should be enjoyable.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. Find a language partner, someone who's also interested in learning medical English.
Practice together, support each other, make it a social activity.
That's the best way to learn.
It's pretty amazing, when you think about it. Learning medical English, it's not just about the words themselves. It's about gaining this whole set of skills that can help you communicate more effectively, especially in a situation that could be really stressful.
You're absolutely right. Active listening, clear articulation, cultural sensitivity, these are all skills that are valuable in any context.
But they're especially crucial in a healthcare setting where clear communication can literally make all the difference.
Exactly. It's about feeling empowered to advocate for your own health and well-being.
And that sense of empowerment can extend far beyond the hospital, It can give you the confidence to travel to new places, connect with people from different cultures, just really embrace everything the world has to offer.
It's like it opens up a whole new world of possibility.
And, who knows? Maybe this deep dive into medical English will inspire you to explore other areas of language learning.
Oh, I hope so, because language learning is such a rewarding experience. It really broadens your horizons.
It does. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay, I like those.
Imagine you're traveling in a foreign country, and you need to explain a complex medical condition to a doctor who doesn't speak your native language.
Whoa, that's a tough one.
Think about the strategies you could use to bridge that communication gap. How would you get your message across?
That's a great question to ponder. Body language would definitely be key.
Yeah. And maybe visuals, like diagrams, or even drawing pictures.
It really makes you think outside the box.
It does. And even if you don't have all the answers right now, just the act of thinking about these challenges, it can help you prepare for those unexpected situations that might pop up when you're traveling.
It's all about being resourceful and adaptable.
Well said. And on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dives into medical English. We hope you found this exploration informative and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
We had a lot of fun putting it together.
Me too. And remember, everyone, practice makes progress.
Keep those tongues wagging, those ears listening, and those minds engaged.
And if you ever feel stuck or discouraged, just remember that feeling of accomplishment, that aha moment when you successfully communicate something in English. That's what makes it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. It's those little victories that keep us going.
So true. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to Learn English Naturally for more insightful explorations of fascinating topics.
We release new episodes every week, so there's always something new to discover.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time on Learn English Naturally.
Happy learning!